Our special guest today is Sheleia Phillips, the grant writing coach, and she is here to talk to us about nonprofit grant writing and some tips for beginners. Now, I'm going to leave all of her contact information below because she is amazing, and she also has a free download for you if you go to her website. So with that, let's welcome Sheleia. Well, welcome. And I would like to start off by getting an introduction on who you are and what you do, because I know you're doing some amazing things in the grants world.
Absolutely. Hey, everybody. My name is Sheleia Phillips, and I'm the founder and principal consultant at S&P Nonprofit Consulting. Pretty much our special jam is helping nonprofits raise more money through grants and sustainable fundraising strategies. To date, we've raised about $3 million and counting for nonprofits all across the country. So we're looking forward to doing much more in the years to come, and I'm excited to be here with you today.
Yay. Well, I'm going to put all of your contact information in the description. So if people want to reach out to you, they can. And I'll include your Instagram handle because that's where we met.
Yes. The grant writing coach. You can find me over at Instagram or on LinkedIn of the same name.
Okay. Well, we can't really talk about grants without talking about nonprofit grant readiness. So do you want to give us a little intro?
Absolutely. So today, we're going to do a little bit what I call beginner's guide to winning grants or just grant writing in general. And none of what we'll talk about today makes sense without making a pit stop and really driving home the point that nonprofits should be grant ready. And simply put, grant readiness is just your organization's capacity to find, write, win, and manage grant awards. Contrary to popular belief, and I come across this a lot, especially with newer organizations, they think that getting your 501c3 is like the end all and be all. But when you think about winning grants and just the complexities and the requirements that go into that entire process, it's just one small part of a bigger picture. So being grant ready is the foundational principle that not only do we uphold here at S&P, but for all reputable grant pros, they're going to make sure to check your foundation. So what does that mean? That means, of course, checking for your eligibility. Are you, compliant and up to date in your state with all of your filings? Do you file your 990? Are you keeping up with anything that the IRS sends you? Making sure that's up to date. It's also what we call clarifying your core. So what we call with clarifying your core is checking your mission, vision, and value statement so that you're sure about who you are as an organization. It's really just your brand identity. We look at what do your programs look like? Do you have fundable programs? Do you have programs that are led by and really grounded and centered in community principles and community-based solutions to the issues that you want to address? We look at financials, things like that, just to make sure that your financial health is in order. And then what does your board look like? What is your governance structure? Making sure that you just have a healthy, full picture of how your nonprofit operates, who you are, what you do, all goes into grant readiness. And that is extremely important when it comes to institutional fundraising.
I'm from Canada, and the same rules apply here. Is before we start writing any grants, because a lot of ours are government grants, and they really want to know, they want to see your financials. They want all the program information. They want to know about your board. They need all of that information.
Yes. And I'm a biologist by trade. So sometimes I pull those principles into writing. And if you think about like the cell, everything happens in that nucleus. Grant readiness can be thought of just as the nucleus of how all of your process will work. As you expand out, whether that's foundation grants or corporate grants, even into federal grants, all of it goes right down into being grant ready, and it just builds upon one another. So I encourage all nonprofits out there to spend some time to do an assessment, check what's going on up under your hood, because that may give you some insight into why you may not be winning the grants that you want or just not winning them consistently.
Yeah. Now, you had mentioned find grants, and I know that's the number one question is, where do you find them?
Okay, absolutely. So we use a couple of different tools, but our preferred and favorite tool is Instrumental. It is the institutional grant research platform that we use here at S&P, and it's pretty popular here in the US. You can not only find grants that are relevant and match your cause, but you can also do things like project management, reporting, and grant reporting overall. So if you all reach out to me on social media, I have a complimentary code where you can try it out for free for 3 weeks. And I would love to share that with you so you can really take a deep dive to see what we see and why Instrumental is really just that preferred tool. We have saved somewhere around, I think it's 3 hours per week using this tool versus others, because things can be disjointed when you're looking at different softwares and Google and all of that. But since it's all in one place, Instrumental saves us a lot of time. And with their automations, being the millennial that I am, I love automations. We get what we call a weekly digest. So once you save a project, Instrumental automatically sends us a list of updated grant opportunities every Monday to review if there's been any deadlines changed, if there's been any change in the award amounts. We get all of that in real time to not only help us out with our grant prospecting, but any reports that we give to clients, it just helps us out with those automations.
Yeah, we have a couple specific to Canada as well, which is we've got Grant Watch, Grant Connect, a few of those. So I'll probably link some of those in the description and your information so people can reach out to you for the American ones.
Yes, awesome. And I've used Grant Watch before. I've also used Grant Station, and they have the international features, and I believe Instrumental does too. So we can just drop all of those in the chat and let folks kind of peruse and see what's the best fit for them. But they're all awesome tools.
So writing grants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are your tips on writing grants for us?
Yeah. So I guess my number one pro tip, and this ties back to grant readiness, is that the clearer that you are as an organization and the work that you do, the easier it is going to be for you to write grants. I'm sure folks in the audience can feel, have that memory of feeling that I don't want to call it stress, but filling out a grant application and there's questions on there that you don't necessarily know because you haven't taken the time to really develop a fully blown program, or you just haven't taken time to consider some of the more sophisticated questions that may come on a federal grant or just a long foundation grant, if we're being honest. So I encourage all nonprofits to, before you go out and really aggressively pursue grants, find out what it is that you do, right? So what are your program strategies? What are the outcomes and the outputs, or what's the impact that your project's going to have in a really clear and succinct fashion, and also in a way that is easy to articulate to others. So anytime that we're writing, we know in our brains like what we want to say, and sometimes that translates out into our writing, and we may skip pieces. Anytime that you're writing, always keep two audiences in mind. One, you have to be very client centric, so you're telling their story. No one is more equipped to tell the story. No one is more equipped to tell their story except for the community. So when I think about writing a needs assessment or writing about the change that we plan to, really implement, I'm really community centric with that. So what are their experiences? What have they told us are actual problems and proposed solutions to, that need to be funded, right? And you also have to keep in mind, and not so much, just be funder aware is what I call it, so that the individuals who receive your grant applications, they have an ease of readability there. So what we call the 7 C's of communications, one of those is clarity, and clear is kind. So make sure that all of your writing is clear, and that only happens when you take a step back and really ask the who, what, when, where, why at all portions of the grant proposal so that you can write easier grants. I guess another pro tip, once you've done all of that deep work, right? We like to use what we call a master grants library. 80% of the grant proposal or the grant proposal process comes before you ever type a single letter. So what we have done to make the process more efficient, and this is especially important now that we're in COVID times, and it seems like it's a grant coming out every 2 days, is that we have a library for each of our clients that we repurpose grant language. So you either can refine it, of course, if there's something that we may have had a gap, or just, in general, we want to enhance some language, or some budgets that are still relevant that we can submit. All of this is important because when that deadline is fast approaching, you want to be able to pull without, second thought, here's where this information goes. Or maybe we're pulling a narrative from a winning grant proposal, and we want to, try our shot again. So making sure that you have that library of very standard information. Of course, it's not a traditional just copy and paste and keep it moving. And it's actually an intentional repurpose of information so that you can, one, just really continuously refine your language, but also two, be efficient in your grants process, because grant writing can be a lot of pool of time, energy, and resources. So the easier you can make that process for you, the better.
Yeah, I worked for an organization where there was a few people that were writing different proposals, and it was like pulling teeth to get them to share the information so we can compile the document and come up with, what received a yes, what received a no, how can we look at it? And
yes, and I love having this content library because it really houses all of your institutional collateral and information and knowledge. So in the event, like you said, it's hard to pull information from teams because everybody's busy, and with everyone working from home, it can be challenging. It preps you for that, but it also preps you in terms of a long-term strategy and sustainability, because folks leave organizations. So if I'm a program director and I get a new job somewhere else, if I don't have all of that information in one place, we are at risk of losing it. So anytime you can document language, attachments, reports, anything that's related to submitting and managing a grant, I would put it all in one place. That could be in a cloud. We use Google Drive, but I know some folks that use OneDrive or Dropbox. Just make sure you have all of that in one place and organize it in such a way that if someone leaves or just takes a vacation or a sabbatical, you know where to go to get that information without compromising your submission process.
that is a great tip, because I know from the grant writing I've had to do in my career, the number one thing I hate is where they ask for indicators, objectives, like that kind of stuff. And it's like, oh, that's the most painful. So keep it and repurpose it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's not just for grants, Joanne. When I think of repurposing content, we hear a lot about that in social media, but we need to apply that to grants. So when you talk about impact data, right? It's not just for the proposal, but I can use that for marketing. I can use that for emails and newsletters and just in conversation with folks in general. So I remember early on in my career, and I had just started out going to luncheons with funders, or, sometimes with individual donors, folks who were on our roster for moves management type work. It would give me the heebie-jeebies to try and call off what we've been doing in a way that I could articulate impact. So I was like, we've been doing great work. And they're like, well, yeah, share some of that, share something with me. And I'm like, I can't remember the numbers in my head. And, now that we've shifted shifted to more community-centric fundraising, that hasn't, the numbers and the data hasn't been that important or grounded. But when I first started out, I was so stressed. So, I just personally, because I'm a data nerd, I like calling those numbers at top of mind. So if I have it in one place, I can always go back and revisit, what did we do last year? How transformative was that grant? And we're only able to do that if we collect that data in some form.
Yeah, I'm a data nerd too. I feel ya.
Awesome. We're here.
Yeah. All right. Winning and managing. That's another section that you said that you covered.
Yes. So winning and managing grants, I feel, can be its own masterclass, like cohort, because there is life after the grant. So a lot of times, especially if you're a newer organization or just starting out. The excitement and the special actions kind of just stop at the award agreement, the letter, and the check, right? So you're just like, oh my God, we won a grant. Hooray. We got to let everybody know on social media. We may or may not, unfortunately, thank the funder, depending on, what your capacity is for fundraising and cultivation. But what I find is equally important, and any grant pro will tell you this, is just making sure that your management is up to date. So what folks typically don't connect with grants are contracts. Grants are really a contractual agreement. So when I talk about having a clear program plan and knowing what we call knowing your numbers, i.e. your budgets, and just what you're going to do, everything that you write in that grant proposal is then going to be included in that contract. So one, we don't make up programs just to respond to an RFP. That's a huge no-no. And we also don't fabricate information, because when we get called back to the carpet by this contract that you're going to sign in order to get the grant award, you're legally and ethically, more importantly, ethically held to that. So grant management is key. And when I think about management, we can just think about it as stewardship. Some institution, a grant maker, has invested their dollars into me. I am now held accountable, not to the grant maker, of course, but I'm held accountable to my community to spend these dollars in a way that I've outlined in this grant proposal. And what that looks like practically in the day-to-day is making sure that you're tracking any revenues attached to the grant, any expenditures. So how much have we spent? Where do we spend it? And what are the codes attached to it? How are we keeping up, again, with our impact and outcomes data? And how you can do that is attendance sheets. If you have any surveys that you're collecting data from, whether that's like pre and post comparisons or just, post the program, that's a good way. And also just keeping up with whatever deadlines and due dates come with reports. So in the example of multi-year grants, sometimes you have a report that's due every 6 months before the final report. So just making sure that, one, you read your grant agreement through and through, which I would say 40% of that you should already know because you put it in your grant proposal, to outline what are the milestones that we agreed to achieve, what are the deadlines, and what are the requirements of the funder, so that we are managing this grant well.
Yeah, no. And I've seen so many organizations try to pound a square peg into a round hole in terms of the grants, and then not following through and kind of using the funds for what they said. And it's so not ethical and just wrong.
We are, when we look at just the grant making process in general, and I talk a lot about being community centric and being and operating from an equity perspective and lens, when we take the perspective of the funder is my partner, it's a mutual exchange of things going on. So they invest, of course, they have some accountability on their end by not making reporting burdensome, not requiring so much of us that it's a strain or some type of stress on our staff. Like that is, that's natural. But we're also held accountable as an organization to do what we say that we're going to do on behalf of the community that we plan to serve. So I think when we look at all of the different factors, the best way that you can show up is just making sure that you're managing and stewarding the award well, because that then leads to more grant awards. And that when we look at it that way, more grant awards mean more people that we can serve and more changes in our community. So it's just our responsibility to do as much as we possibly can to make sure things go well. Now, in real life, we know that most things don't always go as planned. So that's where the relational aspect comes in, to where I'm calling my program director and saying, hey, we foresee maybe some challenges with enrollment. So does this impact our grant in any way? Does this impact future payouts, things like that? Or I've had instances where we're not going to spend the money by the end date. So what should we do? Can we extend the grant period out? It's all about being relational. It's all about centering community in a way and setting up, I don't want to say setting up your case, but really articulating and advocating for your community so that when things happen and they're at the center, it allows for a more open and flexible exchange between you and your partner grant makers.
Yeah, no, perfect. Is there anything else that you wanted to add? Anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to mention?
So one of my other tips that I have really grown to know and love, folks that are familiar with me know that I got into grants like literally baptism by fire. So a lot of what I learned came from Google and the very limited, resources that were available at that time. So as years have progressed, my skill set has not only changed, but it has evolved to do more than just the status quo. So one of my favorite pro tips for folks who want to look at grant writing and grant prospecting from an equity standpoint and a community-centric standpoint is just start looking beyond what's on what I call like the checklist requirements. So using grant research in an RFP, for example, when we do grant research, the tools that we use, no matter what platform, will tell you very basic information, right? It'll tell you when's the due date. What are the eligibility terms? What is the geographic focus? And, as grant professionals, we tend to stop there and like, oh, we're qualified. They're a good partner. But what I love and particularly love about Instrumental is that it allows me to go on the back end and look for more things that aren't necessarily visible to the naked eye. So when we think about community-centric practices and embedding that into our everyday operations, I not only look at the eligibility requirements, but I also look at how do they uphold the community in the way that they practice grant making. So that could look like, do they historically fund organizations that are led by and that serve people of color? Do they serve organizations of similar size and scope as mine? Are they open to general operating opportunities or multi-year opportunities? And going back to our previous conversation, like what does their reporting look like? Is it, burdensome? Is it very particular? Is it, so burdensome that it's taken away staff time and capacity just to fill out one grant report that may only be for $5,000? So I encourage organizations that in your prospect research, don't just look at the RFP because it's gonna tell you relevant information, but it is limited in some sense. Also visit the funder's website to see, what they stand for, what are their values, is there any evidence of their relationship with past grantees? And just, take a look at their history, because that will let you know that your values align and that this is really a true partner. I always share with folks that every grant lead does not always equal grant partner. So taking that process from being a lead, someone that, hey, we identified them, I think we align with their work based on some search terms. That is awesome. That gets you started, but you really have to take the funder that you're looking at through a process. And it's not, hard. You just kind of checks and balances based on what you value as an organization to put them into the grant partner pool and thus in your grant strategy.
Well, that is fantastic. Thank you so much for all of this, because I know, and maybe it's just me, but when I sit down to do a grant, I feel overwhelmed. I feel like it can be scary, and it's really not. It's just make sure to, like you say, have all of your pre-planning and your readiness done, and everything will flow from there. Yeah. Everything will flow from there. And just sometimes the grant process is stressful because we don't know how to organize it. When you look at grants and just the life cycle of it, everyone will know what works for them. So any advice that I give to you all today, as my grandmother would say, chew the meat and spit out the bones. Pull
what works for your organization. And if there's areas where you're like, oh, maybe we need to shift, do what works for you. Grants are not meant to be stressful, but it doesn't mean that they're necessarily, how should I say this? Grants are not meant to always be easy, but they can be simple. So when we think about simplicity, all that comes through strategy, and that comes through, chiming into episodes like this to learn from grant pros like ourselves to, see how they can work for their organization.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm not a grant pro.
I mean,
25 years of fundraising, but my favorite thing is the stewardship part. So somebody else go out and get the grant and then pass it over to me, and I'll steward the bejeebers out of them. So
stewardship is so important to the grant making process. So just look, even by honorable mention, you'll be a grant pro. A lot of times I cannot tell you how successful we have been with a grant because we've stewarded that relationship in the long game sense. So might have had a conversation in coffee 6 months ago, and here's the RFP today, and we end up getting the grant because now we have an advocate, an internal advocate who knows who we are, knows what we do. And when they go in front of the board of trustees or whoever, the review board, they're saying, yeah, I know Sheleia of ABC Foundation. They're great. I've been keeping up with them, going to events and things like that. So stewardship is key. And I tell folks, pick up the phone to even start that off. Like, just pick up the phone. We're humans. People give to people, even if the way the solicitation comes is different than individual giving. So it's all
great advice. I think sometimes people are afraid to pick up the phone, but when the first time I ever saw indicators on a grant request, I'm like, what? I picked up the phone, and that's how I learned. And then I was able to have a laugh with the person on the other end. And then of course they remember me.
Yeah. It's been really fun. While I've been in the consultant seat for about 1.5 years now, right at the very beginning of the pandemic, I was still in a 9-to-5 setting doing grant writing full time. And I can't tell you how fun it was just to see funders in their home element and seeing kids and pets. And that's, for me, it took the anxiety, I don't want to say completely out, but it was significantly reduced, because now I'm like, oh, this is just another person, and just really seeing them holistically and how they maneuver at home, and even how I maneuver at home. I might have, this coffee mug is very basic, but I would have fun coffee mugs, and that could be conversation starters just to take the pressure off. So,
I have my X-Files coffee mug. I've had it for years.
Yeah. So it's things like that just really help you take the label off and see people as people, even and even build a relationship beyond what we quote would have on our list. So we have opportunities now, and I say the best way to get over that fear is to just do it. I had to do it by the skin of my chin sometimes, but I'm much better now and able to navigate conversations than I was 7 years ago when I first started. I used to sweat on the phone. Just sweat, I don't want to do anything wrong. But as I evolved as a fundraiser and just a grant professional, it got a lot better.
Well, thank you again. And again, we're going to list all your contact information below, and people can hook up with you on Instagram.
Yes. I look forward to it.